Okay, so we are talking about content knowledge, which is standard 4. And for this one, I did a lesson on number bonds to 5, and it's their introduction to number bonds.
Very
Do you want to just go through the standards?
good. Sure. So you want to go?
Oh, sure. The first one was academic language. Did the candidate introduce academic language and have students practice using it?
And so for that, I'd say I'd give you a proficient on that one because you introduced the language, and it was an introductory to them because it was the first time for them to use some of these things. So, but you were consistent with them, like asking the question, "What's your equation?" And you did have them repeat the different parts of the equation, and you put emphasis on the plus and minus signs as well.
Yeah, so the main academic language I was trying to hit was, because they're still pretty new with really addition in general. So being clear when they read an equation that it's 2 plus 3 equals 5. So getting all those words kind of set. And also just the word equation, tried to use the word equation and have them repeat the word equation a lot because it's a new word for them. And also the new idea of checking your signs, just as kind of a standard phrase they're going to use a lot in math. Check your signs to make sure, is it plus or is it minus?
Pretty good.
Great. Then the next one was use of technology and other resources for learning purposes. So you use technology as kind of a reward for them and let them play with it and work together and collaborate, which they seem to really enjoy. When they use the computer, when it's the 3 of them, when they each have a role and rotating through the role, it keeps them all engaged.
And so for that one, I'd say outstanding because it did look like a reward. You didn't just put it to them from the beginning. You started your lesson with the introductory vocabulary, and you had them practice it, and then you did some of the games with the blocks, having them manipulate the blocks around to make equations and stuff. And it was only until after all that, and it seems that they had a strong understanding of what they were doing. It was kind of used it as a reward, but it was also still very educational for them. And it was only more so as a follow-up to what they were doing anyway, so you used it real well on that.
Yeah, so I tried to use the Unifix cubes first and fingers on the mat, just as kind of like this is how we can solve these problems. Because the game doesn't really give you any clues or hints, it just gives you the numbers.
Right.
So you're going to have a strategy to use to find the number. So they needed to practice first, but also by the time they got to the computer, they were already doing a really good job of understanding what the concept was. So yeah, they got to play the concept.
That was a good idea.
The next was student misconceptions. There weren't too many chances to go over this one. I guess in order to make sure they didn't have many misconceptions, I tried to use a lot of different teaching strategies before they went to the table to do their bookwork, because I found in the past that if they haven't really used number bonds in a few different ways, they have a really hard time with that page in the workbook.
Right.
So I guess the first thing I was doing was trying to cut misconceptions off before they became a problem. But with the Unifix cubes are kind of tough to understand when they're just getting introduced to the idea of 2 Unifix cubes and 3 Unifix cubes all together. It's the same 5 Unifix cubes you started with. So I tried to go slow, and with Kai, who was having trouble and kept saying, no, it isn't 5, just showing him with just the manipulatives, not really the numbers, that if you take one off, put it back together, take the other numbers off, in the end you're always going to have 5. And he seemed like he was starting to get it, but when we did the next part with our fingers, I think just knowing that we always have 5 fingers on one hand helped him understand better. So he had some trouble, but before we moved on to kind of doing our more assessment level work with the game and the workbook, he kind of got the concept.
So yeah, I agree. And so for that one also, outstanding, because one of the things that it points out is that you redesigned the lesson to correct them. But in this case, you didn't only redesign it, but you introduced more different ways for the students to recognize the different patterns that they might see along the way with this sort of lesson.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a preemptive thing there on the teacher's behalf of what you did. You did recognize that some of the kids were having problems with it, and you introduced some different methods for them, but you also kind of, you gave them more than that. You introduced much more, so.
Yeah, I initially thought that I might not need to use fingers because it seems like it might be a little too easy, but then did realize that maybe starting with fingers would have even been a better idea.
Yeah. And it worked out for that one because it took a couple of the different methods to use for them, especially for one of the students to recognize.
Great.
Kaise.
Yes. The next one was instructional resources. I think for kids at this age, numbers are pretty foreign concepts. So we're still kind of moving from items into numbers for new things. I showed at the beginning when they were doing their regular addition, like they're getting to the point where they can think in numbers and don't need manipulatives for everything. Right. But for new things, having a bunch of different kinds of manipulatives seems to really help. So the plan was the Unifix cubes and the game and magnets and stickers, and then we did fingers too. So just to make sure for every kid, if they get a bunch of different ways to think about the same problem, in the end, they should all get a solid understanding.
For this one also, outstanding again, the difference between the proficient one and the outstanding, it's because of you were ensuring that they are comprehensive, that they understand. In this case, so you were really being kind of individualizing each child, making sure that each one of them, they might not see the concept all in the same way. It kind of falls into the last one too, but I guess this one is just more resource based. And yes, you did use a lot of different resources.
And I guess looking at it too, like the modifies, using the fingers, that was kind of a modification of the lesson plan, but to make sure that the one or two struggling students really got it.
Right.
So great. The next is building on students' prior knowledge. So at this point, they've done doubles, and they've started doing addition to 10 with their fingers, but that's pretty new for them. But I tried to start the lesson with those two concepts and really making sure that the kids understand the fundamental concept of addition is putting two numbers together to get a bigger number. And that's basically what we're doing in reverse. I think if the kids don't understand that, addition's making the big number, it's harder to understand number bonds because you just start with the big number. So, in a way, it is almost subtraction, sort of. But, I tried to make sure that they were reminded of what addition is and the other addition tools we have.
Yeah, I saw you at the beginning. You were like using some of the stuff that they've done before, and you did go over the doubles with them, and you used the cards for that. I'm not sure what this one means though. Clearly links students' prior knowledge and experience as content. What's the difference?
I think in how individual and group work is assigned, which I think is something I didn't really do. Like I didn't use that prior knowledge to like differentiate between students. And
did you?
I don't think I really did. I think I tried to link this with the things that the skills they already have as the lesson is being taught, but I didn't really use it to with individual and group work how it was assigned.
So I'd have to say proficient on that. I'm really not sure. So they would have had to been doing this with you before. You could even classify this as outstanding, right?
Well, I think if maybe as they were breaking into their group work with the game or their group work at the table and their individual work with the workbook, if I was doing more to kind of call back to addition is making a bigger number, putting two numbers together.
I see.
If I would have done a little bit more of that, just kind of, I think I did it at the beginning, but didn't kind of keep calling back to it as much as I could have.
It was only 25 minutes, but I'd say proficient.
Okay, yeah.
25-minute lesson.
Yeah.
You put it in there, but I suppose you didn't call back on it enough.
Then the last one was representations and explanations. So I did try to, explain to them and use manipulatives just to understand the core concept of if something equals 5, no matter how you break down that number, it's always going to equal 5. So when you have, like when you're doing a number bounds problem, there's always going to be more than one solution. I tried to really stress that with both the manipulatives, with their hands, with the magnets on the small whiteboard at the table. So, and like we talked about before, just kind of giving all the kids different ways to do the same thing to make sure that something stuck with everybody.
Right. Yeah, and on this one, because it says for high levels, and you only stayed to the number 5, but then that's the benchmark right now for where they're at, right?
Yeah, I think for the introductory lesson, I probably could have thrown in to 10 somewhere, but I also didn't want to confuse them.
Yeah, and you used a lot of examples of how like you yourself would manipulate your fingers around, or even the what was it, the Unifix cubes around. You like emphasizing like it doesn't make a difference, and you didn't just say like, okay, now it's 5. No, you still had them count. Look, it still totals to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You still emphasized on no matter what you do, you move the cubes around, but you still, rather than just saying, look, it's still 1 and 4 equals 5, it was still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look.
Yeah, and so I guess for me, my idea of like high level for this like introductory lesson would be if they could go to the workbook page and do it without any help. Because usually they need a lot of hand holding, or they'll just do the same equation 4 times.
Right.
So in one lesson, in their one introductory lesson, if they can do that page by themselves, it shows me that they really actually understood the concept pretty well. So that's why I didn't want to go any higher, because I didn't want to confuse them. But I thought they did a good job.
I'd say outstanding. But then, yeah, just outstanding. Why not? Like, outstanding. Because even though you wanted to go higher, you knew that you might confuse them. So you still recognize the fact that you could have given them more, but there's no reason to put it at this point because you're still in the introductory phases to this lesson. So.
And that might just be making misconceptions.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You know, they'll move up to 10 number bounds to 10 soon. But for the first one, I just want to make sure, like, this core concept, they know what they're doing.
Right.
And I think they do.
Outstanding.
Great.